Imagine a place just like the one you once walked into, your childhood classroom. Picture the flip of your desk, the murmur of your friends, the sun streaming through the windows of Okubo Elementary School in Sasebo, Nagasaki. Now imagine that within those familiar walls, two children sat side by side. One, 12-year-old Satomi Mitarai, bright, kind, with a future as open as the sky. The other, an 11-year-old classmate referred to as GirlA, unknown to the world then, but destined to become its focus in the darkest of ways. Late morning on June 1st, 2004, should have been nothing more than another marker in the school calendar. Instead, it became a turning point, not just for those involved, but for an entire nation. Satomi followed GirlA into a nearby study room during lunch hour. No one who watched that ordinary gesture could have seen what lay ahead. Then, in a silence that turned too long, the unthinkable happened. GirlA slashed Satomi's throat, and her arms too, coolly and decisively with a box cutter. Asterisk. Satomi fought back, attempting to rise, but the wounds were too deep, and then she collapsed. Moments later, GirlA returned. Blood riddled her clothes, the blade still in hand. "This is not my blood," she told her teacher, voice calm and eerily composed. Teachers, students, none could reconcile those words with the scene they were about to confront. Only then did the teacher find Satomi, gone, lying face down on the cold floor. Asterisk. Satomi's father, Satomi Mitarai, rushed to the school. When I arrived, Satomi was already lying there collapsed. "I couldn't believe what I was seeing," he said in shock. "I can't put into words what I'm feeling right now. This was not a distant crime, not a stranger in the night. It was a child, committing the unthinkable, and returning to her classmates as if nothing happened." GirlA, later known online as Nevada Tan, was quickly taken into custody. Amid tears and confusion, she confessed with chilling simplicity, "I have done a bad thing." Asterisk. Now, to you watching this, imagine sitting in that classroom, seeing your friend return with blood on her clothes. What would you feel? Fear? Numbness? Guilt for somehow knowing and not stopping it? In a moment, innocence was taken and something unspoken awakened across a nation. Whispers of lowering the age of criminal responsibility started swiftly. Conversations about emotional neglect, the unseen pressures on young minds. It all began here, in that modest school building on a quiet Sasebo afternoon. Asterisk. For many of us, childhood is nostalgia. A time of crayons, simple worries, and scraped knees. But what happens when that childhood is shattered? And what happens when the one doing the shattering is someone not so very different from us? Stay with us as we carefully unravel what led to that moment, what followed in its wake, and what it tells us about hope, guilt, and the delicate edge where youth meets tragedy. It was June 1st, 2004, a day that began like any other in the 6th grade wing of Okubo Elementary School. Classrooms hummed with quiet chatter. Teachers arranged lunch, children talked about weekend plans, and outside, the afternoon sun stretched across the schoolyard. At 11:55 a.m., Satomi Mitarai, aged 12, gentle, bright, well-liked, was asked by her classmate, an 11-year-old girl referred to in court records only as GirlA, to walk with her to a nearby empty study room. No one could have predicted what that invitation would unleash. In those few seconds of closing doors, the familiar turned unknowable. Inside, GirlA drew a box cutter, her hand steady. She slit Satomi's throat, and when Satomi slumped down, unable to stand, GirlA cut her arms too, waiting until she was silent. Then, in a moment more jarring than the act itself, GirlA exited, her clothing soaked in blood, knife still in hand. A teacher, thinking the worst, a self-injury, asked quietly, "Are you okay?" The reply came calm, disconcerting, "This is not my blood." In the study room beyond, teachers found Satomi pale and still, collapsed, gone. When Satomi's father, Satomi Mitarai, arrived, his grief was raw. Satomi was already lying there. "I can't put in words what I'm feeling. I don't have a clue," he said. As news broke, shock rippled through Japan. One child had killed another in a classroom during lunch break. It was unthinkable. GirlA was detained right away. In custody, she cried, refrained from eating, but confessed succinctly, "I have done a bad thing." Reports revealed a fractured friendship. They had once shared art class, basketball games, and even an online diary. But a spat online. Messages Satomi allegedly wrote calling GirlA prissy or overweight rocked their bond. GirlA said that she had planned the attack days prior. The weapon was chosen after watching a television crime drama. The event prompted urgent debate across Japan. Should the age of criminal responsibility be lowered again? Parents and politicians questioned whether schools were nurturing empathy or unknowingly allowing internet cruelties to fester. GirlA was sent to a juvenile correctional institution and participated in counseling. On the school's graduation album, Satomi's classmates chose to leave GirlA's photo blank, but Satomi was included, posthumously awarded her diploma. Her place marked an empty space. We've traced the steps leading to that classroom door and the silence that followed. But what more lies beneath? What pressures went unnoticed? Could empathy have changed a message into a moment? Instead of tragedy, they looked like any other pair of 11-year-old girls. Uniformed, polite, quiet. Two friends walking side by side through the long, fluorescent-lit hallway of Sasebo's Okubo Elementary School. It was just after lunch. The school was still buzzing with the hum of classroom fans, distant chatter, the occasional creak of a chair leg scraping the tile floor. There were no screams, no running, no sign of panic. The two girls made their way into an empty classroom, Room B, and closed the door behind them. What happened next would rupture the collective psyche of a nation known for its discipline, peace, and safety. Satomi Mitarai was shy, reserved, the kind of child who blended into the background. She wasn't particularly outgoing, but she wasn't isolated either. She loved drawing, writing, and like most girls her age, she was just beginning to discover the growing pains of adolescence. Her friend, known only as GirlA due to Japanese legal protections for minors, was quite the opposite. A bit taller, brighter, smarter, and oddly, a little more withdrawn in recent months. Teachers noticed she was quieter, more intense, but no one imagined what she was carrying with her. On June 1st, 2004, at approximately 12:30 p.m., a teacher would stumble into Room B and witness something no educator should ever have to see. Satomi Mitarai lay motionless, her school blouse soaked in blood. Her neck had been slashed open twice. The weapon? A box cutter. Her killer? The girl who walked into the room with her minutes before. But let's pause for a moment. Because this wasn't just a violent act between children. This wasn't bullying gone too far or a playground fight turned tragic. What makes this story terrifying isn't only what happened, but why it happened and who it happened to. What causes an 11-year-old child, not a troubled teen, not a known delinquent, but a child with good grades, a known love for horror movies and manga, to suddenly pick up a box cutter and murder her friend in cold silence? Was it rage? Jealousy? Or something even deeper, something psychological that no one around her could see until it was far too late? This is a story that forces us to question everything we think we know about childhood, friendship, and the face of violence. It shocked Japan so profoundly that even the Prime Minister would address it publicly. And in the aftermath, with the media frenzy, the psychological evaluations, and the stunned silence of a grieving family, the real question still echoes nearly 2 decades later. Could it have been prevented? Tonight, we examine the full, untold story of the Sasebo Slashing and the quiet horror of a child who killed. Not in fury, but in eerie, deliberate calm. Before we continue, what do you think drove this child to kill? Jealousy, obsession, or something much deeper? Leave your theory in the comments. We'll feature the most thoughtful responses soon. It was a typical Monday morning at Okubo Elementary School in Sasebo, a quiet port city in Nagasaki Prefecture. The hum of classroom chatter, the shuffling of feet down the corridor, the calm of another spring day. Teachers were tending to their lesson plans. Children were gathered in classrooms, some finishing homework, others laughing about cartoons from the night before. But in room 2B, away from the cheerful commotion, two girls quietly asked to leave early. One teacher noticed them walking hand in hand. Nothing seemed unusual. They were friends after all. But within minutes, silence turned into chaos. Inside the empty computer room, 11-year-old Satomi Mitarai sat down unsuspectingly, still talking casually, perhaps thinking this was just a private moment with a friend. But instead of returning with memories of shared laughter, only one girl walked out of that room alive. Satomi never screamed. Her throat had been slashed so deeply, she likely couldn't. And the girl who did it? She didn't run. She didn't cry. She simply stood in the hallway, covered in blood, and said, "I've done something wrong." What could make a 12-year-old child pick up a box cutter and commit such a brutal act against someone she once called her friend? Was it bullying, a mental breakdown, or something much darker, festering beneath a seemingly ordinary exterior? This case didn't just shake Japan. It forced a nation to look in the mirror at the cracks in its educational system, the dangers of online culture, and the terrifying notion that even the youngest among us are not immune to violence. She became known only as GirlA. Japanese law protects the identity of minors involved in criminal investigations, but that didn't stop the internet from erupting with speculation. On forums and blogs, thousands of users tried to piece together who she was, what she looked like, and why she did it. The story became even more chilling when anonymous users uncovered her online alias, Nevada Tan, a nickname that stemmed from a photo of her in a University of Nevada hoodie, taken just days before the killing. That image would soon become viral, immortalized in memes, used in fan art, and twisted into internet lore. But this wasn't fiction. This wasn't entertainment. This was the life of a real child, a child who had committed something unthinkable and whose own pain might have been hiding in plain sight. Her name was kept hidden, but her writings weren't. On the popular Japanese blog site, Nikki, she posted dark, unsettling messages. Diaries filled with emotional outbursts, frustration, rage, obsession, mentions of self-harm, oblique references to Satomi. Was this a cry for help no one heard? The officers who arrived at Okubo Elementary that morning weren't prepared for what they would find. Satomi's body lay crumpled in the back of the computer room, surrounded by streaks of blood on the wall, the desk, and even the keyboard. Her school uniform soaked in crimson. Her small frame slumped forward like she had simply fallen asleep at her desk. The scene was silent, hauntingly silent. No screaming, no resistance, no witnesses. Only the sound of sirens and muffled sobs from teachers as the truth began to settle like a heavy fog. When police found GirlA, she was standing outside the classroom. Calm, quiet. Her hands and sleeves were still stained. She didn't try to run, didn't lie. She looked straight at them and simply said, "I did it." During her first interview, GirlA sat down with investigators and showed no signs of remorse. When asked why she did it, her answer was chilling in its simplicity. She said something I didn't like. What exactly had Satomi said? According to sources, it was an online insult. Something minor. A few words exchanged in a chat room. Harsh, perhaps, but hardly the kind of offense one would kill for. This wasn't about revenge. It was about something else boiling underneath the surface. Something unresolved and far more dangerous. She had been displaying signs of emotional distress for months. Withdrawn behavior, fixation with violent horror films, even writing disturbing fiction online. But no one intervened. No one raised the alarm. Not until it was far too late. Child psychologists would later determine she was suffering from a severe emotional disorder, one that had gone unnoticed at home and at school. Despite her young age, her cognitive understanding of death was deeply rooted. She knew what she was doing, and what terrified experts more than anything was that she felt nothing afterward. In Japanese juvenile law, the identity of minors is kept confidential, but the emotional impact of their crimes is not. As GirlA stood in front of a closed courtroom, behind locked doors and drawn curtains, a nation held its breath. The prosecutors painted a picture of a girl who was not mentally stable. The defense argued she had snapped under pressure. The final ruling? She would not be tried as an adult. Instead, she was sentenced to a reformatory, a juvenile psychiatric institution. But it was her demeanor throughout the trial that left the court speechless. She never cried, never looked away. She was 11 years old and utterly unreadable. While the real Satomi was laid to rest, and her grieving parents tried to disappear from the public eye, the internet did the unthinkable. They turned GirlA into a cult icon. Anonymity gave birth to legend. Online forums exploded with fan pages, cosplay, parody art, and an entire subculture around Nevada Tan. What started as an effort to hide a child's identity became a grotesque fandom. Her image, blurred and twisted, was now part of online horror culture. Her story, used for clicks. Her hoodie, a fashion statement. Her crime, a meme. And through it all, Satomi's voice was lost. How did we get here? How did we turn tragedy into trend? Why did society find comfort in rebranding a real child's death into online entertainment? When the headlines faded and the media trucks drove away, what remained was silence. Deafening silence. A wound had been carved into the heart of a community, and it would never truly heal. Satomi Mitarai's family, shattered by grief, withdrew from public view. Her father, a respected journalist, stopped writing for a time. Her mother, quiet, composed, was seen at the memorial service, holding back tears that the world would never fully understand. No parent prepares to bury a child, especially not this way. Satomi was laid to rest beneath a sky that couldn't stop crying. The ceremony was small, private, but the city mourned with them. Strangers left paper cranes and cherry blossoms by the school gate. Messages in chalk. Forgive us. We saw nothing. We did nothing. Japan had no words. No clear answers. The case reopened difficult conversations that the country wasn't ready to have. Could a child commit true evil? Were schools ignoring the signs? Had online culture become too violent, too accessible, too influential? GirlA had become a symbol, but for what? No one could agree. For some, she was a cautionary tale. For others, a failed child in a failing system. Her nickname, Nevada Tan, based on the University of Nevada sweatshirt she wore during the killing, exploded in online forums. She became a meme, a character, a punchline. But what people forgot was that she was real. And so was Satomi. In the digital world, tragedy often becomes content. Satomi became a file name, a hashtag. Her death became trivia. Her killer, internet legend. But in Sasebo, it wasn't about memes. It was about a chair that would never be filled again. A laugh that would never echo in the halls again. And the parents still asking why. The Japanese government, under immense pressure, opened emergency sessions. Should the age of criminal responsibility be lowered from 14? Could 11-year-olds be held accountable like adults? The debate divided the country. Some demanded stricter laws. Others urged empathy, reform, and education. But one truth remained. The system had failed both girls. In the years that followed, Okubo Elementary School made changes. Counseling became mandatory. Anonymous reporting systems were introduced. Teachers were trained to look closer, listen harder. Satomi's memory became a quiet revolution, a reminder that the unthinkable doesn't happen overnight. It brews in silence, in neglect. Her death taught a country to pay attention. But was it too late? Do you believe children under 14 should be tried as adults for serious crimes? Or should the focus be on rehabilitation and understanding? Let us know in the comments below, and tell us, how should a society balance justice and mercy when innocence turns violent? In the days following the tragedy at Sasebo's Okubo Elementary School, Japan found itself staring into the mirror, unsure of the reflection staring back. What could lead an 11-year-old to kill a classmate with such cold precision? Why hadn't anyone noticed? And more hauntingly, could it happen again? The Sasebo Slashing didn't just send shockwaves through one community. It became a national reckoning. Parents, educators, psychologists, and lawmakers all asked the same question. What signs did we miss? Within 24 hours of the murder, GirlA's real name, Nevada-tan, was leaked online. The internet, in a cruel twist, didn't just spread her identity, it made her a meme. She became an icon of horror culture. Her photo in University of Nevada sweatshirt circulated with edits, jokes, and parodies. But this wasn't fiction. This was a real child, a real killing, a real tragedy. Satomi Mitarai's funeral was small, quiet, and heartbreakingly brief, much like her life. Her family chose not to speak publicly. Friends left notes and origami cranes. Teachers mourned with guilt. But GirlA, she was also just 11. Detained and evaluated, the court ruled she could not be held criminally responsible in the same way an adult would be. Japan's youth justice system, built on rehabilitation over punishment, placed her into a reformatory center. She would be held until she was deemed fit to re-enter society. No one knew how long that would be. And even when she was released, years later, her identity would remain legally protected. She would vanish in a society under a new name, a new life, while Satomi's name was engraved in stone. This wasn't just a school stabbing. This was a national trauma. The government launched a formal investigation into school bullying, child mental health, and internet influences. Experts testified in Parliament. Laws were reconsidered. Reforms proposed. But deeper than policy, Japan faced something more intangible. A cultural hesitation to confront youth mental health. A reluctance to talk about anger, loneliness, or the emotional burdens children silently carry. Many blamed anime, violent video games, or the internet. But those were surface-level answers. The real problem was quieter. Satomi and GirlA were once friends. They drew manga together. They traded notes and snacks. Then, a miscommunication, a public embarrassment, a hurt that festered in silence. And in a school system where conformity and stoicism are prized, GirlA had no safe outlet for her rage and confusion. So she sharpened her blade. How do you heal a country from a crime that doesn't make sense? How do you protect children, both from harm and from harming? What happens when we don't listen until it's far too late? What would you have done if you were the teacher that day? Do you believe Japan's justice system handled it fairly? Let us know in the comments below, and share this story if you think these conversations matter. They turned her into a meme, a killer into a cartoon, a tragedy into a trend. And behind every share, every laugh, every click, a real girl and a real victim were forgotten. The internet has always had a dark sense of humor. But what happened after the Sasebo Slashing? It was different. It was global. After GirlA's identity was accidentally leaked online, with that now infamous photo of her in a gray Nevada sweatshirt, she became Nevada-tan. And the world didn't mourn. It fetishized her. Fan communities across Japan, South Korea, America, and beyond created an entire subculture around her. They drew her as an anime villain, gave her superpowers, made her the face of yandere, a Japanese trope for emotionally unstable, obsessive characters. Her story became less about Satomi's death and more about Nevada-tan's legend. She became an idol of the internet's underground. Have you ever seen this image before? The girl in the gray sweatshirt with the cold stare? Did you know it was real? What makes this worse? The timing. The internet was just beginning to explode, and forums like 2channel for Chan and LiveJournal weren't moderated like they are today. Dark humor thrived. So did shock culture. And Nevada-tan, a real 11-year-old girl who murdered her classmate, became a twisted mascot for online rebellion, a symbol of cuteness and carnage. The tragedy stopped being about what happened and started being about who could make a trend. But for Japan, this wasn't just a digital nightmare. It was a cultural embarrassment. How do you stop a meme from spreading? How do you tell the world? That girl was just a child. And so was her victim. You can't. The internet moves on. But families don't. Satomi's parents had to grieve in silence, while their daughter's killer became an icon on t-shirts, in comic books, and in internet jokes. And GirlA, she had no control over her legacy. Even as she was hidden, her face, that one image, became more recognizable than any politician, pop star, or peace symbol of her time. But not because of what she stood for, because of what she took away. The Nevada-tan meme still exists today. It resurfaces every few years. New generations discover it, unaware, or perhaps uncaring of the real story beneath the pixels. But here's the hard truth. Internet fame doesn't need permission. Not even from a killer. Not even from the dead. Do you think the internet has gone too far with how we treat real tragedies? When does dark humor become exploitation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. In September 2004, a Japanese family court sentenced GirlA, whose real name, Natsumi Tsuji, would never be publicly confirmed, to a state-run juvenile correctional facility. She was not tried as an adult. The focus was rehabilitation, not retribution. Counseling became a requirement, and psychiatric evaluations lined her path toward reintegration. Despite the severity of her actions, she received a graduation certificate, a necessary step for her entry into junior high school, symbolizing society's desire to guide her back toward neutrality. Years later, as she completed her institutional stay, she was released. Psychiatrists had deemed her fit to return to society. Her identity remained legally sealed, proof not of her redemption or recovery, but of a system striving to protect both the fragile promise of rehabilitation and the privacy of a young life beyond a headline. Satomi's family journeyed the opposite route. Their grief never healed through apologies or parole. Their loss remained enduring, a reminder that some wounds cannot close. Society often asks, what can healing look like when the harm is irreversible? In Japan's juvenile system, reform, not punishment, was the guiding principle. GirlA, or rather, Natsumi, was encouraged to rebuild. Her release carried no fanfare, no footage, no media cycle. It was a quiet mercy and a quiet burden. Meanwhile, Satomi's chair remained empty. Her story became a lesson in silence, in empathy, and in understanding how compassion might be the only path forward after tragedy. What do you think about rehabilitation for juvenile offenders? Should the focus be on redemption or justice? Tell us in the comments, whether in memory of Satomi or in consideration of a troubled child growing up into a troubled adulthood. Time has a strange way of folding tragedy into memory. In Sasebo, where cherry blossoms still bloom each spring and laughter still echoes through classrooms, the horror of June 1st, 2004, lives on, not loudly, but in quiet fragments. A classroom repainted, a hallway walked a little more slowly, a memory that never leaves, though its name may never again be spoken. GirlA was just 11. Satomi Mitarai was just 12. Both children, both lives filled with questions, curiosity, and pain. One life was taken, the other lost in a different way. What remains today are whispers of a society grappling with modernity, technology, isolation, and the emotional terrain of its youngest generation. The story of Satomi Mitarai is not just about a killing. It's about a disconnect, a silence, a missed cry for help, and perhaps, just perhaps, a reminder to truly see our children before their pain becomes a headline. How do we balance justice and mercy, especially when both children need saving? What signs are we missing in our classrooms, our homes, and our digital lives? Could this have been prevented? It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men. Frederick Douglass. The case of Satomi Mitarai is often referred to as the Sasebo Slashing, but that cold label diminishes its humanity. Behind it was a shy girl who loved drawing, who got nervous presenting in class, and who had her entire life ahead of her. And behind it, too, was another girl who spiraled into something unrecognizable, not because she was evil, but because somewhere along the way something broke. If this story moved you, don't let it be just another case in your queue. Talk about it with your children, with your friends, with your students. Because true crime isn't about monsters. It's about people. And sometimes it's about the ones we never expected. What are your thoughts on the Sasebo case? If you knew someone hurting, would you know the signs? Like, subscribe, and share to help us tell the stories that need to be heard.